Haidong! In this video, we're going to talk about weight distribution in our stances. This is not going to be a strictly Gumdo video. If you're doing this in terms of, what does the Federation think about X, Y, or Z? So don't do this from this one. This is going to be a general swordsmanship thing, and this is also something that I would like pretty much all martial arts practitioners, especially if you really do engage with stances, that's what I would like for you to consider. Additionally, because I like transparency, so although the ideas within this are going to be mostly a synthesis of me, I'm going to try to, if it isn't strictly from me, I'm going to try to again cite where it comes from, but the idea was inspired by relearning the weight distribution in the stances for Fiore. Right, so Fiore was an Italian swordmaster. So the two sources that I'm getting this from is my HEMA instructor in Reading, PA, as well as a fellow named Guy Windsor, who also does Fiore. So I'm going to have their information, assuming I get their permission, down in the doobly-doo. So we're going to use the Teidosei, front, long stance, whatever you want to call it, as our main prototype to kind of play with these ideas, right? So just assume a general Teidosei. It doesn't have to be like however you usually do it yet. So this is going to be one of those videos that I know would be really weird to do alongside because it can be cringy sometimes, but it is something that I would like for you to feel for yourself. This is one of those things that sure you can kind of pick up intellectually, but I want you to actually have that visceral reaction, that visceral feeling of how your body is moving. This is also going to be very different from person to person. So yeah, so the three kind of segments of weight distribution, right? There's going to be the 50-50, so again, 50 front, 50 back, 70-30, right? And then almost all, and then kind of just the weight of the leg behind you. So I'm using Guy Windsor's vocabulary for that. Let's take a look, right? So the style that I usually have, so this is the way that I usually do it for myself. It may not necessarily be what I do if I'm teaching a Gumdo seminar, but it is what I use for myself. It is going to be simply, so it's not the same exact thing, it is going to be using 50-50. So you might be thinking like, it's a front stance, shouldn't you be more in the front? Right? But I'm going to justify it for a few different reasons, right? So if you are in a stable stance, this is not me moving into something else, right? This is me kind of hanging out, right, in the stance, which you can do in this in sparring, and if you've ever sparred me, you know I do, right? But yeah, so from here, if I really think about engaging 50-50, right, what's going to happen is, to really make that easy, is I'm going to have to activate my back glute. Again, if you've been taking some of my classes, glute has been a major thing that we've been talking about. So engaging that back glute, the more you engage that back glute, first of all, the easier it is to keep that heel out, because it's very easy to have this kind of front stance, which is almost like a fencer's lunge or a rapier lunge, right? But we want to have that back heel back. Why? Because it helps engage the glute. And if your glute is activated, and then allegedly the muscle running alongside the spine is also activated, you're going to be a lot more structurally sound. You're going to be able to move generally however you would really want to. It's a very stable guard. One thing this is good for, as you just saw, is shifting, right? So I'm facing you, oh no, okay, right? So it's very easy to kind of shift directions when you're even, right? So when you're 50-50. But let's start talking about the other extreme. So this is, if you've done Gumdo, if you've done, I believe Taekwondo is the same as well, is you usually associate the front foot with 70%. Let's take a look, right? So if this is 50, again, engaging back glute, you can still engage that back glute and get 70. Notice that there's going to be, instead of going straight up and down, it's going to be a little bit further forward. Now, obviously, you can sink further back to compensate for that. But if you're really thinking about 70-30, it's going to be a little bit more weight on the forward. Now, side note, this is an idea that is from Master Jenko, is going to be make sure, because your leg is, or your knee is in fact a hinge, make sure the knee is facing the same direction as the foot. is also an idea that Mr. Windsor mentioned. So make sure you're not doing, so I'll face you to do it. And I'll do this. So hopefully you can get an idea. So that's where the knee is facing, is the same direction as the foot. Don't try to do one of these guys where your foot's there, your knee's there. Bad. But anyway, so in theory, if this is facing the same direction as your toe, you can kind of like sink down however far you need to go. However. Right, so if we have our 70, cool. What is this good for? This can, if you actually go from 50 to 70, which is the major use, at least for me, when we're doing center cuts and using the center cut, using the stance to absorb the momentum, is just that, right? So if it's 50-50, I do a nice happy center cut, this is going to help absorb the momentum, so I don't do like one of those guys, right? So shifting into a 70 is going to be really good for absorbing unwanted momentum, right? Now you can also hang out in the 70. It's going to be a little more stressful for you, right? Because if you're 50-50, you're engaging in glute, it's even, right? So you kind of just can hang here, not all day, right? But the more I sink forward, it's going to be a little more tiring because I'm using slightly smaller muscles. Maybe not slightly, but I'm using smaller muscles, right? However, this being slightly weighted forward, again, not leaning, but weighted forward, is going to let me move forward a little bit more easily, right? So from here, I can just shift and move a little bit more easily than it was 50-50. So that is one major boon to the 70-30. If I have any philosophy majors out there, so obviously if the argument's good, if you want to like take down someone's argument, you can take something to an extreme, right? So like, okay, so 70% meant I was able to move forward more easily. Therefore, if I put like all the weight on my front foot, I should be like, Superman going forward, or wherever the Marvel equivalent is. So, okay, so 50, 70. I've got shit. So with a 90, again, I'm taking this from Mr. Windsor, is you kind of just like do a little bit of these guys, so you know that pretty much whatever's on the back foot is just the weight of the leg. So it's like, okay, so yeah, from here, if I want to, it's going to be very easy because it's kind of like crouched, almost like a potential energy spring, right? It's ready to just push into another momentum, right? Now noticing, it's going to be easy to go from I'll call it 90 instead of whatever the actual percent is. So 50, 70, whoops, I need to have the back foot down a little more. So 50, 70, 90, right? It's going to be easier to go from a 90 to a 90 as you land because you're going to have a lot more propulsion with it. This is going to be one major boon to the non-50-50s. So with 50-50, it's very easy to have this very stable approach, right? Can you propel yourself? Sure, it'll just be a little bit weird, right? It's not going to be as impressive versus if I go to, so that was 50-50, let's do straight on to 90, right? If I'm 90, bang, it's very easy to push myself in the direction. You can still have, obviously, that stable step, right? But it's not necessarily what it's renowned for. Another good thing with the 90-10 is it's going to be a lot easier to pivot on that foot. So not pivot direction, or pivot as in double, but pivoting here is going to be a lot easier if I have most of my weight on the front foot. So the idea of this is going to be very closely tied to the way you actually cut in Fiore, right? So this is more of a Fioran stance as opposed to like Gumdosa or Kanoka allegedly. So that's going to be a whole other idea. But just keep in mind the way you cut is going to be influenced by the way you move. So ultimately, what's my advice, right? So which one's right, right? Because everyone likes to be right. Well, as you can probably imagine, they all have their own uses, right? So what I probably would do if I'm dueling someone, so say sparring situation, not necessarily me versus the world kind of situation, I would do more of the forward weighted if I'm trying to engage and really try to dispatch that person. If I have to be a little bit more cautious, a little more defensive, I might do a little bit more of the 50-50, probably mostly 50-50 and shifting into 70 if I need to get a little bit extra distance, or if I need to start really aggressively pushing someone down. But ultimately, it is, well, it's actually not up to you sometimes, it's up to the martial art that you're trying to teach and or learn, but it is something that I would like for you, dear listener, to practice, right? So like really feel how your body reacts to stuff. So first of all, you might be taught, like, oh, 70-30, but you might actually maybe do closer to 50-50, right? Or you might be like, yeah, 70-30, right? So I just want you to have your own understanding of how you naturally move. Play with the extremes a little bit. Obviously, don't cement them into your memory yet, because that might get you in trouble from higher powers. But I would like for you just to play with these ideas. But with that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, and keep training. Haidong.